morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So today I'll be speaking to you all a bit about what we've been working on at REN, and a bit more generally about the future of the multi-chain space, some of the things we've had in mind, and what the evolution really looks like in our eyes. So for a bit of background about myself, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Jaz. I've been working at REN for the last 4 or 5 years since its inception, and recently co-founded REN Labs, which is an initiative to make sure the REN ecosystem continues to grow and thrive, and just to explore other projects in the multi-chain space, some ideas that we've had in mind. And we'll go through a few of those today as well. So I know there's some people here that are relatively new to crypto, or at least new to the cross-chain space. So I'll start with a bit of a background about how we've got here. In 2009, of course, Bitcoin launched. The first Bitcoin block was mined. There wasn't much of a multi-chain space at that time, as you can imagine. The only real alternatives were Bitcoin forks. And there isn't a lot you can do with Bitcoin in terms of scripting and actually building programs on top of it. So that was basically the case up until 2015 when Ethereum launched. Ethereum being the first blockchain with a fully Turing complete programming language built on top of it. So you can build programs and deploy them to the chain and have a concept of state on this chain. And then over the last few years, we've started seeing more and more layer ones launch. So Solana, Avalanche, these kinds of chains. Now, a question you might be thinking is, why do we need all of these chains? Why do we need all of these alternatives? We already had Ethereum and Bitcoin and some other chains. I mean, pretty simply, I think we need this sort of specialization in crypto, in the blockchain space. There are a lot of different areas that these chains can specialize in, whether it's security, speed, cost, and some of these chains, they have to make sacrifices in certain areas to be able to specialize. So some of these chains, they have limitations. Those can be security, cost, speed, privacy. Some chains are cheaper than others, obviously. Some chains have a higher throughput. Some chains are specialized in privacy. So if there are some cryptographic primitives you need to access, it might have some inbuilt features that make those things easier. And I think there's previous slide. Yeah, so I think just in general in the blockchain space, we need users and developers to have the option to choose between these chains. You can think of it like programmers, they have the option to choose between dozens, if not hundreds of programming languages for any one task. Similarly, data engineers can do the same thing with databases. And we need the same options as blockchain developers and as users to be able to choose between these chains, whether we want to optimize for cost, we want fast transactions, decentralization, all of these different things. So what if there was a chain that could solve all of these problems? Would that be the end of the multi-chain space? I think firstly, I don't think it's possible for there to be a chain to rule them all, if you will. There are always different sacrifices that these chains can make in order to make improvements elsewhere. And I think more importantly, if there was a new chain, hypothetically, that could do all of these things, the main thing would be it would be isolated from the existing ecosystems in the blockchain space. So Ethereum, Solana have these massive communities already, right? NFT projects, ERC20s. And these projects, the users of these projects, they not only have a vested interest in these projects, but in the chains themselves. So it's very hard to get these communities to shift between chains. So I think although we might see some sort of consolidation of these chains over time, over the next few years, we won't see, just a single chain. There'll always be these options. So some of the key takeaways, we need specialization and we'll always have these confined ecosystems. So we need to find a way for these chains to exist in harmony. So we'll just go through some of the current approaches, some of the things that we've been looking at REN and just in general for solving the interoperability problem. So the naive approach is just having every application support all of these chains on their own. That's Feasible when there are a couple chains, especially if those chains are just forks of one another, for example, Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, etc. But then when you start seeing greater differences between these chains, Solana, etc., with different programming languages, it just becomes unfeasible to support for every application to support all of these chains individually, right? The second approach, the second approach is that of like IBCs, so inter-blockchain communication protocols or parachains, like Cosmos and Polkadot. And these allow you to whip up simple blockchains very simply, but they're not very flexible in terms of what you can do with them. So if you need a bit more customization, then they might not be the best approach for you. And then the third approach that we've been working on at REN for the last few years is that of a bridge that allows you to wrap these assets essentially and use them in the DeFi space. So the way that works is, say you have Bitcoin and you want to use that in DeFi, what you do is you take that Bitcoin and you send it to a network, a decentralized network, and that network custodies the Bitcoin for you. So the network of nodes shares a private key where none of those nodes actually know what that private key is, but they're able to do computation using secure multi-party computation on this key to produce signatures. And what you can do with these signatures is you can submit them on chain on Ethereum or Solana and mint a wrapped version of the asset like REN BTC. And then in order to get your Bitcoin back, you just burn the REN BTC or the wrapped asset and then show proof of that to the network, and then you get your Bitcoin back because there's always this one-to-one peg. So there are a lot of bridges now. We've been seeing a lot of different kinds of bridges popping up, and they all have their limitations. They make trade-offs in some places in order to specialize in others. Some of the limitations include security. So some of these bridges are kind of nascent. They're not as battle tested as some of the other bridges. Costs, so they can be pretty expensive to use, just in terms of having to pay gas on multiple chains, and then fees to the network that's custodying your Bitcoin. There's assets, so not all bridges support every kind of asset. There are differences between ERC20s, NFTs, all of these assets that require differences in the ways that these assets get bridged and custodied. And then I think some of the two bigger ones are liquidity and user experience. So with the more bridges that are starting to pop up, this liquidity that we have in these pools on Ethereum and Solana is starting to get more and more fragmented. So you have REN BTC, you have WBTC, you have all of these kinds of Bitcoin variants now, and then the liquidity is just getting thinner and thinner. And then the other big problem is user experience. So having to have all of these different kinds of wallets, having to hold native assets to pay gas, the user experience just at the moment isn't ideal and could be a lot better than it is. So what are some of the challenges in building a solution that doesn't face these problems? There's this quote I found online that I think summarizes it pretty well. So the biggest challenge to blockchain interoperability is the fact that there are many blockchain systems which do not speak the language. There are differences between smart contract use, transaction schemes, consensus models. And to overcome some of the underlying issues, then there is a need for a technology that enables universal communication between these blockchains. So what I mean by that is having a layer zero, essentially, that abstracts away a lot of this technology for you. So developers and users don't have to think about what blockchain they're interacting with. They just think about what asset they have and what they want to do with it. And that's some of what we've been exploring at REN Labs over the last few months as well. So chains can differ pretty drastically. Network security is hard, and you cannot compromise user experience. These are just some of the high-level challenges that you face when you're building an interoperability solution. So the future of multi-chain. We need tools that abstract away blockchain, so users only need to think about what application they're interacting with. So as mentioned, the user has an asset, they have Bitcoin, they have Zcash, whatever they have, and they want to trade it, they want to provide liquidity, they want to generate yield, whatever they want to do. They shouldn't have to think about what kind of wallet they've got on their machine. They shouldn't have to think about what assets they might need to hold in order to pay gas, right? All of these different things. They just need to think about what they have and what they want to do or receive in return. it should be as simple as that. So what we've been working on at REN VM is the concept of a layer zero. So having this essentially a blockchain in and of itself that supports every other blockchain and then provides users and developers with a simple API to interact with these different chains. So there's a few different concepts here that really make this possible and really make for a pretty simple user experience overall. The first is that of boundless liquidity, which, as an example, say a user has BTC and they want to receive DAI. These assets are on different chains, obviously, Bitcoin and Ethereum. And if a user wants to do a trade currently with them, they have to go and send that Bitcoin somewhere. They have to wrap it. Then they have to do a trade on Uniswap or another exchange. And then they have to pay gas, and then they receive DAI in their wallet, right? That's a lot of steps. So if you just go back to the previous slide. So with this layer zero, what you can have is you can have dApps built on top of the layer zero that can interact with all of these assets directly. So one example of a dApp that we're working on at the moment is that of a cross-chain AMM, a simple AMM, and it has two key concepts. The first concept is that of cross-chain liquidity pools. So essentially liquidity pools like you'll see on Uniswap or SushiSwap, etc., Serum, but you have cross-chain assets. So you have BTC as a base pair. And then the second concept is that of integration with existing liquidity pools on other chains. So we don't want to try and replace this liquidity that's already on other chains. We want to try and extend it. So that's a lot of what we've been focusing on. So in this case, the user sends Bitcoin, and then the trade gets split up into native components, like cross-chain components, and then non-native components. So the portion of the trade that needs to get executed off-chain outside of the layer zero, on Ethereum, for example. And then you have the BTC to ETH side, and then ETH to DAI, if those are the pairs with the highest liquidity. And what the layer zero does is it executes the ETH to DAI side first, because that portion of the trade is happening on an external chain. And once that's successfully executed, it can do the BTC to ETH side. That has this nice property of atomicity, so the trade either gets fully executed or not executed at all. So the third concept that really makes this the user experience nice for the users is that of cross-chain accounts. And these, you can think of them as accounts that are powered by REN VM. Users can send and receive any assets that are supported by REN, so all of the native assets that we support currently, ERC20s, all of these things. And I think most importantly is that it's controlled by your existing wallet. So your Web3 wallet, whether it's MetaMask or something else, all you do is you sign transactions, you sign messages, and send these messages to this layer zero, which is REN VM. So you don't have to submit any transactions. You don't need like a new cross-chain MetaMask wallet or anything. You just use your existing wallet, and that can control your cross-chain account. And another cool property is that trades can be executed on this layer zero with zero gas. Because a lot of these assets are living on top of the layer zero, you're able to trade without having to worry about holding ETH or BNB, all of these native assets. And if there is actually gas required, if a portion of the trade is being executed off-chain, then that can just be abstracted away into the price. So although the user is paying gas, it just gets abstracted away and they shouldn't have to think about it. So to summarize, there's three key components that we see as in the future of multi-chain: the layer zero, boundless liquidity, and the concept of cross-chain accounts. And at REN, we're super excited to be working on these things, and we're really looking forward to share some demos and prototypes and more information with you guys over the coming months. Thank you.